but this is very good progress.
Question number 5, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by his statement, quote, "I don't think that universal child payment is at all likely. We went away from that some years ago. In New Zealand, we have a very targeted system through Working for Families," end quote.
The Honourable Bill English on behalf of the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, yes.
Metiria Turei.
How does the very targeted in-work tax credit child payment system, which he claims is better than a universal payment for children, help the children of New Zealand's poorest families whose parents don't work enough hours to qualify for that child payment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, those families the member is referring to are, of course, on benefits, or they are recipients of the guaranteed minimum family income. The in-works tax credit was designed by the previous Labor government as a payment for those who were in what was then defined as full-time work. So by definition, those who are not in full-time work don't qualify for it.
Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If, as the Prime Minister claims, very targeted assistance is better than a universal child payment, will he then support my bill that specifically targets a child payment to New Zealand's poorest children whose parents can't find enough work because unemployment is so high?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, no, the answer is the government won't be supporting the member's bill, but she's giving a misleading impression that children in households where the parents aren't working are not the recipients of a child payment. Of course they are, as part of the benefit payment. The member can argue about whether that payment should be larger, and I suspect she thinks it should be, but there are child payments per child to beneficiary households.
Metiria Turei, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How is it fair to the children of families in Christchurch, for example, who lost their jobs due to the earthquake, that they lose both their employment income and the in-work tax child payment? How does that give those kids who need it the most a good life and a fair future?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, for families in Christchurch, it is difficult when they lose their job, as it is for many other families where a job is lost. There is income support in place for those families, which includes child payments. As I said before, the member can argue whether they should be larger, but child payments are incorporated. The in-work tax credit was designed on the principle of work first, a principle that I see has recently been endorsed by the Children's Commissioner's expert group. It is designed as a payment to families to encourage full-time work and appears to have been successful in doing that.
Metiria Turei.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister not agree that the in-work tax credit child payment has failed to provide sufficient support to those families who need it the most and the children who need it the most, because it does not, because parents who might work but not qualify for enough hours don't get access to that payment, leaving more than 200,000 children in families who don't qualify and who live well below the poverty line? Isn't that a failure?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not a failure of the in-work tax credit, because the in-work tax credit was designed by the previous government, supported by the National Party at the time, as an incentive to work, and that appears to have been successful. If the member is concerned about the absolute level of income of those on benefit, then she's quite free to advocate that there should be larger payments. But the in-work tax credit is there for a particular purpose, and we don't intend to change that purpose.
Metiria Turei. I'd call Metiria Turei first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why is the Prime Minister opposing all the options for a child payment that will reach the poorest of New Zealand's children, including the universal child payment that's been proposed by the Children's Commissioner for those 0 to 6 years old, a targeted child payment as proposed in my bill that will go to the children of the poorest families. When he knows that 270,000 children are living in poverty, a situation that his government is making worse, when will he step out of La La Land and do something for the poorest kids?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I won't deal with each of the members' propositions, but the universal payment proposed by the Children's Commissioner's expert group is, I have to say, a bit unspecified. The group itself recognises it would have to be paid for, and I think they believe it could be paid for by reducing assistance to families a bit further up the income scale. Well, when the expert group reports to the Commissioner, who then reports to the Government, of course we can consider all their propositions. The Government's focus for low-income families is on dealing with those factors that would lead to persistent poverty and vulnerability. So, for instance, the Minister of Social Welfare has announced the social obligations, which are part of encouragement for those who are on benefit with children to get their children into early childhood education, part of the encouragement for them to look for appropriate part-time work and to get the kind of skills which will help them lift income. So we have a strong focus on those families being able to get work as our top priority.
The Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr Speaker, what advice has the Minister received about the impact on low-income working families of a shift away from the current targeted arrangement to a more universal payment in respect of children?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I haven't asked for particular advice on that, but I think I could guess what it would say. And it would say that a move from a targeted program to a lower universal payment would leave many low-income working families worse off, to start with, and secondly would leave them in a less beneficial position relevant to being on the benefit. It has been a focus of social policy, regardless of party in New Zealand in the last 20 years, to ensure that the reward for work is significantly greater than the income that one can receive on benefit, and we intend to maintain that policy.
Metiria Turei.
Why on earth is he refusing, the Prime Minister opposing, any solution, whether it's increasing the minimum wage, food in schools, a universal child payment for some kids, a targeted payment for the poorest kids? Why is he refusing to support any solution that will help the children he knows are in the worst poverty in this country? What did those kids do to deserve his government's neglect and derision?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I find those comments offensive, actually. The government is not. The government is dealing with a wide range of complex issues to ensure that people have the opportunity to lift themselves out of the position they are in where they are on low income. The real danger to children is persistent deprivation that goes with low income. That's a relatively smaller proportion of the 200,000 she refers to, and the government's measures, particularly in welfare reform, which is a very comprehensive program, are designed to promote the mobility for those families. But again, I would deny the member's assertion that the government is treating these children with neglect and derision. That's typical of the kind of exaggerated claim she makes to try and get into the political debate.
Question number 6, Pesata Sam Lotuinga.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Development. What